There is a phone call happening in a Social Security office right now, in some town you have never heard of, and it goes almost exactly the same way every single time. A widow calls in. She is in her late 60s or early 70s. Her husband died a few months ago, and between the funeral and the paperwork, and the silence in the house that used to have someone else's coffee cup in the sink, she has not had a single moment to think about money. And then she opens a letter from Social Security, or she finally makes the call she has been putting off, and she asks the question that changes everything. What happens to my husband's benefit now? And the answer she gets back depends entirely on decisions that were made years earlier, decisions she may not have even been part of, decisions her husband made alone at a kitchen table or on a government website, decisions that neither of them fully understood the weight of at the time. Sometimes the answer is good news. She finds out her husband delayed his claim, understood the rules, and left her with a survivor benefit that will support her for the rest of her life. Sometimes the answer is devastating. She finds out he claimed at 62 because a coworker told him to, and the benefit she is about to inherit is permanently, mathematically smaller than it ever needed to be. Here is what almost nobody tells married couples until it is too late. Social Security is not one decision. It is two people's decisions, tangled together, and one spouse's choice about when to claim does not just affect that spouse. It can determine how the other spouse lives for the next 20 or 30 years, especially after one of them is gone. Today we are talking about the most misunderstood, most underplanned, and honestly, the most financially consequential part of Social Security for married couples: spousal benefits and survivor benefits. Most people have never heard these terms explained clearly. Most people do not know that a single filing decision made by one spouse can be worth well over $100,000 to the other spouse over the course of a retirement. And most people find this out only after it is too late to change anything. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how spousal and survivor benefits work, the single biggest mistake couples make that quietly costs them a fortune, the specific strategy that can protect the lower-earning spouse for the rest of their life, and the group of people, divorced Americans, who are entitled to benefits they have almost certainly never claimed. Let us start with the part nobody explains well, because without this foundation, none of the strategy makes sense. The first thing you need to understand is that Social Security actually gives you access to more than just your own work record. Most people think of Social Security as a simple transaction. You work, you pay into the system, you eventually collect a benefit based on your own earnings. That is true, but it is only half the picture for married people. If you are married, or if you were married for at least 10 years and are now divorced, you may be entitled to a second type of benefit entirely, one based on your spouse's or ex-spouse's earnings record instead of your own. This is called a spousal benefit, and here is how it works. If you are married, you can claim a benefit worth up to 50% of your spouse's primary insurance amount, their full benefit at their own full retirement age, even if you never worked a single day in your life, or even if your own benefit is smaller than that 50% figure. The Social Security Administration will automatically compare your own benefit to your potential spousal benefit and pay you whichever one is higher. You do not get both stacked on top of each other. You get the larger of the two. This exists because Social Security was designed decades ago around the reality that many households had one primary earner and one spouse who worked less or not at all often to raise children or manage a household. That spouse still needed retirement income, so the system built in a way to provide it, based on the working spouse's contributions. Now here is the second type of benefit, and this is the one that catches people completely off guard, because almost nobody explains it until a spouse has already passed away. When your spouse dies, you do not just keep receiving your own benefit. You become eligible for something called a survivor benefit, and it works very differently from the spousal benefit. Instead of being capped at 50% of your spouse's amount, a survivor benefit can be worth up to 100% of what your spouse was actually receiving or was entitled to receive at the time of their death. If your spouse delayed claiming and built up a large benefit through delayed retirement credits, you inherit the benefit of that decision. If your spouse claimed early and had a permanently reduced benefit, you inherit that too. This is the piece that makes spousal filing decisions so much bigger than most couples realize. When one spouse decides when to claim Social Security, they are not just deciding their own monthly check. They are deciding, in many cases, what their surviving spouse will live on for the rest of their life, potentially for decades, after they are gone. There is also a timing rule attached to the survivor benefit that surprises people, because it is different from every other rule we will talk about today. A survivor can begin collecting a survivor benefit as early as age 60, which is younger than the earliest age for claiming your own retirement benefit or a spousal benefit. But claiming that early comes at a real cost. If you claim a survivor benefit before your own full retirement age, it is permanently reduced, in some cases, by close to 29% compared to what you would receive by waiting. Many widows and widowers, especially those who suddenly lose a spouse's income and feel financial pressure immediately, claim the survivor benefit as early as possible without realizing that full retirement age, not age 60, is when that particular benefit reaches its full value. Unlike a spousal benefit, a survivor benefit does continue to grow the longer you wait, up until your own full retirement age. After that point, it does not increase further, but it also does not shrink. Knowing this window and understanding that 60 is simply the earliest possible age rather than the recommended one can make a meaningful difference for anyone who eventually finds themselves in that position. Let us move to the second major thing you need to understand. And this is the mistake that costs couples more money than almost anything else in this entire topic. Most people assume that if delaying your own Social Security benefit increases it by 8% a year, then delaying your spousal benefit must work the same way. It does not. This is one of the most expensive misunderstandings in all of retirement planning. A spousal benefit does not receive delayed retirement credits. It does not grow after your full retirement age. If your full retirement age is 67, your spousal benefit reaches its maximum value the moment you turn 67. Waiting until 68, 69, or 70 to claim a spousal benefit does not increase it by a single dollar. You simply lose months or years of payments you were entitled to collect for absolutely no benefit in return. Think about how significant this is. A husband and wife hear the advice everywhere, from articles, from friends, from well-meaning family members, that waiting until 70 maximizes your Social Security. That advice is true for your own retirement benefit. It is false, completely false, for a spousal benefit. If the lower-earning spouse is planning to claim based on their partner's record rather than their own, waiting past their full retirement age does nothing but leave money on the table, month after month for years. There used to be a strategy built around this difference, and you may have heard an older relative mention it. It was called filing a restricted application, and it allowed one spouse to claim only a spousal benefit at full retirement age while letting their own retirement benefit continue growing separately until 70. It was a powerful, completely legal way to collect income while still maximizing a second larger benefit down the road. That strategy was closed to most people by a law passed in 2015. Today, if you were born on or after January 2nd, 1954, you cannot choose to claim only a spousal benefit while your own benefit keeps growing. The Social Security Administration now uses something called deemed filing, which means the moment you file for any benefit, you are automatically deemed to be filing for all benefits you are eligible for, and you are simply paid whichever one is larger. The old workaround is gone for the vast majority of people watching this. If someone tells you about this strategy today, Understand that it very likely no longer applies to your situation, and confirm your birth year and eligibility directly with the Social Security Administration before assuming you can use it. What this means practically is that the timing decision has become simpler, but it has also become more permanent and more important to get right the first time. Now let us talk about the third thing, and this is the strategy that can genuinely transform a couple's financial security, especially for the spouse who ends up living alone. Consider two people. One of them was the higher earner throughout their career. The other earned significantly less, or stepped away from paid work for years to raise children or care for family. This is an extremely common pattern, and it creates a very specific opportunity. The higher earning spouse should think very seriously about delaying their own benefit as close to age 70 as their finances allow. Remember what we covered earlier. Delaying past full retirement age increases a personal benefit by 8% per year. Guaranteed, with no market risk involved. And remember what a survivor benefit actually is. It is not capped at 50% like a spousal benefit. It can be worth up to 100% of what that higher earner was receiving. This means that if the higher earning spouse delays until 70 and something happens to them later in life, the surviving spouse does not inherit a diminished benefit. They inherit the full, maximized benefit that resulted from the delay. For a couple where one spouse is likely to outlive the other by many years, which describes the vast majority of marriages, this single decision can be worth well over $100,000 in additional lifetime income for whichever spouse is left behind. Meanwhile, the lower earning spouse can often claim their own benefit or a spousal benefit earlier to provide household income, while the higher earner's benefit continues to grow. This creates a household strategy rather than two separate, disconnected decisions. One spouse provides steady income now. The other spouse builds toward a larger, protective benefit that will eventually support whoever survives. There is a nuance here that matters and deserves honesty. If the lower earning spouse claims their own reduced benefit early, and later the higher earning spouse passes away, the surviving spouse's eventual survivor benefit is generally the full amount the deceased spouse was receiving, not a reduced version tied to how the survivor originally claimed. But there is an exception called the widow's or widower's limit, which can reduce the survivor benefit in certain cases if the deceased spouse claimed their own benefit early rather than delaying. This is precisely why the timing of the higher earner's claim matters so much. Delaying their benefit does not just help them individually. It directly protects the ceiling of what their spouse can eventually inherit. Let me put real numbers next to this, because abstract percentages rarely land the way actual dollars do. Picture a couple, Robert and Grace. Robert was the higher earner across his career, with a full retirement age benefit of $2,800 a month at 67. Grace earned less over the years, with her own full retirement age benefit sitting at $1,100 a month. If Robert claims at 62, his benefit is reduced to roughly $1,960 a month permanently. If Grace outlives him, her eventual survivor benefit would be locked to that reduced number, not the larger figure Robert was capable of earning by waiting. Now picture the alternative. Robert delays until 70. His monthly benefit grows to approximately $3,470, using the standard 8% annual growth rate applied from full retirement age to 70. Grace, in the meantime, claims her own reduced benefit at 62, bringing in roughly $780 a month to help cover household expenses while they wait. When Robert eventually passes away, whether that is at 75 or 95, Grace's income does not collapse. Her survivor benefit rises to match Robert's full $3,470 a month, more than 4 times what her own benefit alone would have provided, and dramatically higher than the reduced figure she would have inherited if Robert had claimed early. Over a retirement that could easily stretch 20 or 25 years as a widow, That difference is not a rounding error. It is the difference between financial independence and financial strain, and it was decided entirely by one filing decision Robert made in his 60s, years before Grace ever needed to rely on it. This is not a decision to make casually or based on a rule of thumb from a podcast or a relative's opinion. The right choice depends on both spouses' health, both of their family longevity histories, the household's savings and expenses, and how much income is needed in the near term versus later in life. But the pattern holds for most couples. When there is a meaningful gap between two spouses' earnings histories, delaying the higher earner's claim as long as financially possible is one of the most powerful, lowest risk financial moves available to a married couple heading into retirement. Now let us talk about the fourth thing, and this is a group of people that this topic almost never reaches, even though it applies to millions of them. If you are divorced, you may still be entitled to a spousal benefit, or eventually, a survivor benefit, based on your ex-spouse's earnings record. This surprises a huge number of people, because it sounds like something that should not be possible after a divorce, and yet it is written directly into how Social Security works. The requirement is that the marriage lasted at least 10 years. If your marriage met that threshold, you are generally eligible to claim a benefit based on your ex-spouse's record, worth up to 50% of their full benefit while they are alive, structured the same way a spousal benefit works for a currently married couple. If your ex-spouse has since passed away, you may be eligible for a survivor benefit worth up to 100% of what they were receiving, following the same rules that apply to widows and widowers. Here is what makes this benefit especially valuable and especially underused. Claiming a benefit on your ex-spouse's record does not reduce their benefit in any way. It does not affect their current spouse if they have remarried. It does not require their permission, their involvement, or even their awareness that you have filed. If you meet the eligibility requirements, this benefit exists independently, quietly, sitting on your record, waiting to be claimed. There is one additional detail that matters. If you are divorced and your ex-spouse has not yet filed for their own benefit, you can typically still claim a divorce spousal benefit as long as you have been divorced for at least 2 years, and both of you are at least 62. You do not have to wait for them to file first, the way a currently married spouse generally does, given how common divorce is and how long many marriages last before ending. This means there is a significant number of people approaching or already in retirement who have a source of income available to them that they have never investigated, simply because nobody ever told them to look. Consider someone like Linda, divorced after a 14-year marriage, now 64 years old, and living on a modest income from a career in retail management. Linda assumed that once the divorce was finalized, her connection to her ex-husband's Social Security record ended along with the marriage. It did not. Because her marriage crossed the 10-year threshold, and because she has not remarried, Linda is entitled to a divorce spousal benefit based on her ex-husband's earnings, which turn out to be significantly higher than her own. She had gone 4 years past her full retirement age without ever knowing this option existed, simply collecting her own smaller benefit. Once she learned about it and filed the appropriate paperwork with the Social Security Administration, her monthly income increased by several $100s, money she was always entitled to and had simply never claimed. Stories like Linda's are far more common than most people assume, precisely because this benefit is so rarely discussed outside of a financial advisor's office. It is also worth noting what happens if you have been married more than once, and each marriage lasted at least 10 years. In that situation, you are generally allowed to claim a benefit based on whichever ex-spouse's record provides the higher amount, not simply the most recent one. Very few divorced Americans are ever told this, and it means some people are leaving a genuinely larger benefit unclaimed simply because they assumed only their most recent marriage counted. Now, the fifth and final thing, the one piece of action that turns everything we have covered from information into an actual plan. If you are married, this cannot be a conversation that only one spouse has in their own head. It has to be a conversation both of you have together, with real numbers, because the decision genuinely belongs to both of you. Go to ssa.gov and set up a My Social Security account for each spouse individually. Each of you can see your own projected benefit at 62, at your full retirement age, and at 70. Sit down together and put all of those numbers on paper, side by side. Then ask the questions that actually matter. Who earned more over their career, and by how much? Based on health and family history, who is likely to live longer? Can the household afford for the higher earner to delay claiming until 70, using savings or the lower earner's income to bridge the gap in the meantime? And if you are divorced, was your marriage at least 10 years? And have you ever actually checked what you might be entitled to on your ex-spouse's record? While you are having that conversation, it is worth writing down a simple household timeline rather than treating this as one abstract decision. Note both of your birth dates, both full retirement ages, both projected benefits at 62, at full retirement age, and at 70, and then note your combined household income need for each stage of retirement. Ask specifically what the household lives on between the higher earner's full retirement age and 70, if that spouse chooses to delay. Is it the lower earner's benefit, savings, a part-time income, a pension? Naming that bridge plan in advance removes most of the anxiety that causes people to abandon a delay strategy midway through, simply because the plan was never made concrete in the first place. If you are the higher earner in your marriage, understand that your filing decision is not really just about you. It is about the person who is statistically more likely to be the one left standing, managing bills, managing a household, managing grief, on a single income for the final years of their life. Delaying your claim, if you can afford to, is one of the most direct forms of protection you can build for the person you love. Let me go back to that phone call I mentioned at the beginning, because there are really two versions of it, and the difference between them is not luck. It is planning. In one version, a woman calls Social Security after her husband's death and learns that he claimed at 62, right when he became eligible, because he wanted the money as soon as possible, and nobody sat the two of them down to explain what that decision would mean for her later, alone. Her survivor benefit is permanently smaller than it needed to be, capped by a choice made years earlier that she was never truly part of. In the other version, a woman makes that same call and learns something different. Her husband understood the 8% growth, understood what a survivor benefit actually was, and made the deliberate choice to delay his own claim until 70, even though it meant a smaller check for a few years while they leaned on savings and her own earlier benefit to get by. When he passed, she did not inherit uncertainty. She inherited the full, maximized benefit that decision was designed to protect, and it carried her financially for the rest of her life. Same system, same rules. Two completely different outcomes, decided years in advance, by whether anyone actually understood what they were signing up for. So here's what I want you to take away and actually act on this week. Number 1. A spousal benefit is capped at 50% of your spouse's full retirement age benefit. And unlike your own benefit, it does not grow after your full retirement age. There is no reason to delay claiming a spousal benefit past that point. Number 2. A survivor benefit can be worth up to 100% of what your spouse was receiving, including any increase they earned by delaying their own claim. If the higher earning spouse can afford to wait until 70, that decision directly protects whichever spouse ends up surviving the other. Number 3. If you are divorced and your marriage lasted 10 years or more, go check what you may be entitled to on your ex-spouse's record. It does not affect them, and it does not require their involvement. But it could mean real income you have never claimed. Number 4. This is not a solo decision. If you are married, sit down with your spouse this week. Pull up both of your projected benefits at ssa.gov, and talk honestly about who should claim when, based on your actual health, your actual savings, and your actual life expectancy, not on what a neighbor or a coworker did. You spent decades earning this. The people you love are going to be affected by how you claim it, sometimes for far longer than you will be here to explain it yourself. Make the decision with your eyes open, together, while you still have the chance to get it right. If this video gave you a clearer picture of how spousal and survivor benefits actually work, subscribe so you catch the next one, where we are breaking down the required minimum distribution mistakes that quietly push retirees into higher tax brackets, and the withdrawal order almost nobody gets right.